Bonjour and good day. I want to start off by talking about the inflation. Right now, it has risen to the highest rate since 1983. And what that translates to for real people is that it's getting harder and harder to afford the everyday cost of life. Groceries, putting gas in the car, everything is getting more expensive and families are really hurting. And we've seen the reports from Canadians that 1 in 4 are going hungry, literally can't afford enough to feed themselves. That 1 in 4 are going to lose their homes if interest rates continue to rise. So we've got a real serious trouble on our hands and people need help. So we've been really adamant that we've got to directly send help to Canadians who need it. Families, working people, working families, they need help. They need some relief. Workers did not cause the inflation, so they should not be the ones that bear the brunt of the solution to dealing with inflation. And that's why we've been really focused on getting help directly to families. And what we proposed is sending as much as $1,000 to families right away, as quickly as possible, to give them that help that they need to pay the extra cost. Our proposal is one that will not increase inflation. It's about redistributing the windfalls in the system, the GST windfall that the government has right now as a result of the inflation. We can redistribute that back through a GST tax credit that's increased for families by doubling it. We know that families are in need of help, and we can increase the Canada Child Benefit by $500, directly sending help to families. This is something that I brought up with the Prime Minister, and I said, this is something we need to do. We need to help people to lessen the burden on their shoulders, to help them out in this time. And I'll continue to push for and fight for help for people now who are hurting because of the cost of living going up. Donc, maintenant, le taux de l'inflation a surmonté à un niveau, un des pires de 1983. Donc, ça veut dire la situation est difficile, vraiment difficile. Et qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pour les familles? Ça veut dire que le coût de la vie augmente et ils ont de la difficulté, ils ont de la misère à rejoindre les deux bouts. C'est vraiment difficile, c'est vraiment tough à ce moment. Et c'est pourquoi on propose des solutions. Ce n'est pas la faute des travailleurs que le taux d'inflation a augmenté. Donc, ça ne doit pas être les travailleurs qui ont la pression sur les épaules pour régler l'inflation. Donc, notre solution, c'est de livrer l'aide financière directement aux familles. Ça veut dire jusqu'à $1,000 pour les familles, pour les aider. Et on peut faire ça sans ajouter à l'inflation parce que notre solution, c'est vraiment de redistribuer l'argent dans le système. On sait que le gouvernement a gagné plus de revenus à cause de l'inflation. On peut utiliser ça pour redistribuer l'argent directement dans les poches des familles, dans les poches des travailleurs. Et puis, avec les autres mesures, on peut augmenter le bénéfice canadien pour les enfants. Ça veut dire d'argent direct dans les poches des gens. On doit agir parce qu'on a entendu les rapports qui disent que les Canadiens ne peuvent pas acheter un montant suffisant d'épicerie. Les Canadiens ont peur de perdre leur maison, leur logement à cause de l'inflation. Donc, on doit agir pour les aider et on a proposé des solutions pour les aider tout de suite. J'ai parlé avec le Premier ministre pour partager comment c'est une priorité de livrer l'aide financière directe aux familles et on va continuer d'exiger le gouvernement d'agir et d'aider les gens. Merci, thank you. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
We'll take questions in the room first and questions online afterwards. Please use the raise hand function. If you have a question here online, nous allons prendre les questions dans la salle en premier et en ligne ensuite. Utilisez la fonction lever la main si vous avez une question et vous êtes en ligne. Première question. Chris?
Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you.
see you.
Two separate questions. First one is the discrepancy between RCMP Superintendent Darren Campbell and Commissioner Brenda Lucki at the mass shooting inquiry. Just an open-ended question. What do you make of this discrepancy? What's your take on it, please?
Well, the allegations are very, very serious. And I want to highlight how serious the allegations are. We have a situation where in one of the worst mass shooting in our history, that there is an allegation that instead of focusing solely on making sure the families get the information they need, on helping people, on responding to the crisis. There's an allegation that the Prime Minister's office, or the Prime Minister and other individuals related to the government, interfered in the goal of politicizing the question of gun control, using this horrific shooting as a reason for gun control. That is wrong. There is no other way to put it. That is wrong. It is deeply problematic. We need to be sure, and Canadians want to be sure, that any decision we make around gun control is about keeping people safe. That should be it. It should be about safety of Canadians. It should be done in a responsible, prudent way that keeps Canadians safe. That should be the goal. It should never be, there should never be any question that decisions are being made politically for a wedge or a political advantage. And it should never be the case, and I can't believe I'm actually saying these words, that a mass shooting would be in any way used for a political wedge. And that's the allegation that we're dealing with, and that is deeply troubling. And the discrepancies just add to the confusion around this and add to the real seriousness of this allegation. We need to find out what actually happened. This is something that deserves attention, and Canadians ought to know what actually happened here. And we need to be assured as a nation that decisions that we're making around the safety of Canadians is for their safety solely and not being used as a political wedge.
Second subject, I see former NDP leadership candidate and Northern Manitoba MP Nikki Ashton is down for a question today. For many, many, many months, we've seen Ms. Ashton only appear in the House of Commons virtually. A colleague tells me he saw her on the street yesterday. So the question to you is, has Nikki Ashton been appearing in the House of Commons in question period virtually from her home in Ottawa, not coming into the House of Commons like you and the rest of your caucus? How can that be on? How can that be doing her job if she's appearing in the House of Commons from her Ottawa home, not from Northern Manitoba? How can this be on? I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this, please.
That is not at all the case. My understanding is that Ms. Ashton has been in her riding. Her riding is a remote riding, more rural riding, where there's been deep concerns about lack of access to help around COVID-19 and access to health resources. So my understanding is that that Ms. Ashton has been in her riding, and that is not at all the case that she's been appearing from Ottawa. She is in Ottawa today and has been in person for meetings in Ottawa in person, but throughout the pandemic, like many others, has been in her riding.
Mackenzie Gray with CTV. We've heard from the government both yesterday in the House and today from Marco Montesino and Bill Blair that they very strongly have said that there was no interference. We've also heard from Brenda Lucki saying that there was no interference, that what was alleged by Mr. Campbell did not happen. Who do you believe? Do you believe the government and Brenda Lucki, or do you believe Mr. Campbell?
This just raises the problem here. The fact that we're even having this discussion, it should never be that there should even be an allegation that there was any political interference in something as horrific as the mass shooting that happened in Nova Scotia. It is horrific. Families are still grappling with it. People are still left with questions unanswered about what happened, why they weren't advised of what was going on, what decisions were made, why they were made. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of grief. And that is the focus. That should be the focus. Gun control is very serious, very important that we do it right. But the fact that there's any question, that there's doubts being raised about the decisions of the government around gun control and whether they were using this incident as a political opportunity, whether there was interference, the fact that this question remains or this question exists is the problem. That is wrong that this is even going on. And I think the question that you raised highlights why we need to get to the bottom of this. There should be a serious reflection and investigation into what actually happened, and those questions should be clearly answered for Canadians.
The Conservatives have come out and said they think it's sick what's happened, and they do not believe the government. They believe Mr. Campbell's version of events. But you're the government's partner in many things, and you've been supporting them through this. So I think it's important for Canadians to know where you stand on this. Who do you believe in this situation? Do you believe the Nova Scotia RCMP, or do you believe the Commissioner of the RCMP and the government's explanation of what happened?
Right now, I think those questions are still unanswered. And what Canadians deserve is to have the answers, to have the facts, and to have an investigation into this. This is serious. this allegation of interference is very serious. The fact that the government is alleged to have been interfering with this mass shooting is deeply problematic. It is wrong. It is a gross interference into a horrific shooting, and we need answers. So right now, the truth is not clear, and there's a serious allegation before us, and we need to know why are there different versions of events, what actually happened, and this is something that should require the attention of Parliament to get to the bottom of what actually happened.
You want a parliamentary investigation? Just to be clear, you said investigation?
Yeah, I want the truth to come forward, and I'm open to any proper forum for that to happen, whether that's through a committee investigation and calling witnesses there, or if there's another forum for it to happen. It's clear that this question needs to be answered. Was there interference? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Those are questions that Canadians have, and rightly so, and we want to see them answered.
Bonjour, M. Singh. Valérie Gamache de Radio-Canada. Je voulais vous parler un peu bilinguisme aujourd'hui. Est-ce que vous trouvez ça normal que le gouvernement fédéral exige que 68 de leurs fonctionnaires au Québec soient bilingues contre 13 pour le reste du Canada? Est-ce qu'on ne se retrouve pas dans une anglicisation de la fonction publique actuellement?
Et je pense que c'est un exemple d'un échec, clairement, que le gouvernement ne défend pas le bilinguisme, ne défend pas la langue française. Les chiffres que vous avez mentionnés et les chiffres qu'on sait montrent clairement un manque de leadership et un échec de leadership dans dans la question de bilinguisme et de s'assurer que le gouvernement fédéral fait son travail pour défendre le bilinguisme au Canada.
Et dans un autre dossier, on comprend que le gouvernement fédéral va retirer le financement à Hockey Canada et que le Bloc québécois réclame une enquête indépendante. Est-ce que d'abord c'est la bonne décision de la part du gouvernement? Et dans le cadre de cette enquête-là, qu'est-ce que vous souhaiteriez avoir comme réponse ou comme question qu'on devrait poser?
Donc, la question de retirer les finances, c'est une étape claire que dans une situation horrible, et j'appuie le fait que le gouvernement fédéral a pris une étape. Mais je pense en général, si on regarde la situation en total, on a vu le harcèlement sexuel, violence sexuelle dans les forces canadiennes. Et après longtemps, pas des actions pour régler ce problème vraiment sérieux. Et encore avec un autre organisme au niveau fédéral, on encore voit des inconduites sexuelles. Donc, ce que ça montre, c'est le fait qu'on a un problème, un vrai et fort problème, et une répétition de manque de leadership du part du niveau fédéral, du gouvernement fédéral. Et c'est vraiment décevant parce que ça montre que ce n'est pas quelque chose qui est pris au sérieux. Ça envoie un message horrible aux femmes, aux survivantes de violences sexuelles. Donc, c'est quelque chose qu'on doit régler. C'est clair que ça doit être une priorité. Le gouvernement a donné des paroles, a dit qu'il n'y a aucune place pour ces sortes de conduites, mais leurs actions ne suivent pas ce qu'ils ont dit, leurs paroles. Donc, je veux voir une approche sérieuse, une approche pour vraiment régler le problème dans les forces canadiennes, dans toutes les institutions fédérales. Et avec cet exemple de Hockey Canada, c'est encore un exemple du fait que la question de inconduite sexuelle n'est pas prise au sérieux et on doit changer ça. Sure. What we are seeing in Canada is at the federal level is a troubling pattern of behavior where sexual misconduct, violence, harassment is not being taken seriously. From the Canadian Forces, where it is abundantly clear that for at least the term that this government's been in power, that it has been very obvious that there are serious problems in the Canadian Forces and it was not taken seriously. The number one recommendation made by the previous Supreme Court judge that oversaw an investigation into the problems in the Canadian Armed Forces said clearly there needs to be an independent process for people to come forward to raise concerns and to raise serious allegations of sexual misconduct. And that hasn't happened in the time that this government has been in power. And now with what's going on in Hockey Canada, while I support the step of withdrawing financing as a serious step, there is an overall pattern of behavior where this question of misconduct, particularly as it impacts vulnerable people, is not being taken seriously. Particularly the message that's being sent to women, it is completely wrong that this is not being taken seriously and it's not being fixed. And so my firm words are that this government, that the federal government has to take this seriously. We need to see concrete action so that in any institution at the federal level, there is no existence, there is no presence of misconduct or harassment, sexual violence at all.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Hi, Mr. Singh. On inflation, a number of leading economists, as well as the Conservatives, have criticized the government's plan for not doing anything to tamp down demand. And the plan that you're putting forward seems to fall into the same category in terms of providing more funding, but not doing anything to lower demand. What's your response to that?
So this is a really important reflection. The traditional approach to dealing with inflation is to reduce demand, and one of the tools used is to increase interest rates. And while that will work, the problem is alone, if that is the only measure, the people that are impacted by that approach will be those who are already hurting. So working families that are a little over leveraged, maybe have a car payment and a mortgage that they're just getting by with the other expenses, if they see their interest rates go up and that is the only step the government takes, they're going to be in a world of pain. And we've already heard from Canadians that that's what they're experiencing right now. 1 in 4 can't afford groceries. 1 in 4 are going to lose their home if interest rates go up. So what we're saying is we have to lessen the brunt of the impact of interest rates going up and help people right now that are dealing with the cost of living going up. So what we're proposing is not at all going to contribute to inflation because it's not injecting new money. What we're saying is we need to redistribute existing money in the system. We know that the Canadian government has experienced a windfall with GST, with inflation. So we're suggesting using the GST tax credit, which will go to working families that need it more. It'll go to working families and not the wealthiest. So it will not actually contribute to inflation because it'll lessen the impact on those working families that are hurting. Using the Canadian Child Benefit also will target Canadians that need help, working families that need support, and it will not go to the wealthiest millionaires and billionaires. So our approach is not injecting money that's going to increase the overall money in the system, but it's about redistributing wealth and going to the people who need it most. And we know that if inflation is solved by interest rates alone, it's going to mean people are going to suffer, workers are going to be hurt. That can't happen. We cannot allow that be the only approach to dealing with the inflation. And that's why our suggestion, we're open to others, but our suggestion is to redistribute the windfalls that corporations have made because they've increased the prices of their goods beyond the increased costs. And that's why they're seeing record profits. There's no way they would see record profits if they just increased their prices to match the cost. They've gone above that. Economists have said they're responsible for 1/4 of inflation, meaning that corporate greed alone, just increasing prices because they can, has contributed to 1/4 of the inflation that we're experiencing. So we're saying that that can't continue. We can't allow corporate greed to go unchecked, and we can't allow families that are hurting right now to not get help. And that's why we're suggesting our approach, which would target help to the families, working families, and it would help people right now, and it would not contribute to inflation. We've confirmed this with a number of economists.
Thank you. And on a completely different topic, I'm wondering if you've been briefed on the situation with the earthquake in Afghanistan, whether you think that Canada should be helping, and if Canada does send aid, given the situation in Afghanistan, what kinds of channels Canada should send aid by?
I have not been briefed on this. Anytime there's a humanitarian crisis, Canada can play an important role and should play an important role. The complication in Afghanistan, of course, is with the Taliban regime and how we can properly send support with without supporting a regime which is responsible for some massive human rights violations. That is a tricky situation to solve, but the response should be always, as Canadians, we want to help out when people are hurting. When there's humanitarian crises around the world, we have stepped up as a nation, and I expect that's what we should do, and I expect that's what Canadians want us to do. But we have to do it in a way that recognizes the particular complexity of the situation on the ground in Afghanistan, and that we're not inadvertently helping a regime that is responsible for such gross violations of human rights.
Yeah, hi. We're coming to the end of the session, and I'd be interested in your impressions of how the confidence and supply agreement has gone, particularly whether it's met your expectations, and whether you've managed to squeeze enough out of the government to make it worthwhile. And the other question is, do you feel in some aspects you might have been taken for granted? I know the NDP has been supporting the government on a number of votes on problematic bills, and is there anything where you'd like to see improvement?
We always envisioned from the beginning of this agreement that we would use our power to get help for people, and that our part of the deal would come up front in a lot of ways, as the confidence and supply would happen first, those moments. And that means that we've supported the passage of some bills through Parliament. And in exchange, we wanted to get help to people. We know people need help, and that help will come. And that help will come in the form of dental care, making sure people get their teeth looked after, starting with kids under 12, as well as a Canadian housing benefit, which is a $500 top-up going directly to about 1 million Canadians. And so these two are the requirements in the deal that need to be met by the end of this year. We are very confident this will happen. We had always expected that we would provide our support up front because it would take time for these programs to be developed and delivered. We are very confident these programs will be out the door by the deadline. But I made it really clear. I had a conversation with the Prime Minister as a part of our agreement, and I made it very clear. If Canadians do not get the help that they need, we cannot continue with this agreement. I say that not as a threat, because I'm confident this will happen, but I wanted to make it very clear that we did our part. Now we expect the government to deliver, which is the help that Canadians need to get their teeth looked after, and to get some direct financial support. That will happen. I'm confident it'll happen, but I made it very clear to the Prime Minister that that is our expectation. Without that help getting to Canadians, without dental care, without kids being able to get their teeth looked after, and without direct financial supports, our help or our support will not continue.
Are you including in that direct financial support the $1,000 you want to go to hard-pressed families? You mentioned you'd had a conversation with the Prime Minister about that. Are you trying to leverage your position to get them to pay up, or is that out with the confidence supply agreement?
We're always trying to use our position to get more help to people. So you can always count on us to find ways to get more help to people. The agreement, though, is specifically the $500 top up for the Canadian housing benefit and the dental care, the help to kids to get their teeth looked after for free. Those are the two things that we need to see. And we're also saying, given at the time that we made this agreement, there were early signs of the cost of living going up. It was not at the level that it is right now. Given where it's at right now, we've now made it very clear that we need to see additional supports as well. Those are separate from the agreement, but we'll continue to push for more. As we've always stated, the agreement lays out a floor, things that we've negotiated that we will see delivered for Canadians that will help people out right now. But it doesn't set a ceiling of what we can ask for, what we can fight for. And we will always continue our efforts to fight for more help for people, because we know people need more help. They need more than what we've been able to achieve. And those are important steps, but there's more help that people need. And we'll continue to push for that.
Bonjour. Monsieur Singh, sur la crise des passeports, la ministre avait dit hier soir qu'il y avait des coupons de rendez-vous qui allaient être distribués ce matin pour les files d'attente pour permettre aux gens d'avoir un rendez-vous et de revenir. Or, il y a moins de rendez-vous que de nombre de personnes qui attendent en ligne. On dirait que c'est une crise qui est difficile à régler. Là, vous feriez quoi si vous étiez au gouvernement?
En général, ce qui se passe avec la crise des passeports, premièrement, le fait qu'on utilise cette phrase, c'est bizarre qu'on est dans une telle situation, parce que c'était prévisible. C'était clair que quand les restrictions, les limites de voyage étaient enlevées, que les gens vont voyager encore. Mais c'est vraiment un échec au niveau fédéral qu'on est dans cette situation. Ce que le gouvernement aurait dû faire, c'est de priviser ce problème et d'embaucher les ressources nécessaires, les travailleurs nécessaires pour répondre aux besoins. Un besoin élevé naturellement parce que plus de gens peuvent voyager. Donc, on aurait dû éviter cette situation complètement en prévisant cette augmentation de besoins, de demande. Donc, on aurait pu éviter tout ça. Mais à ce moment, la question, c'est vraiment une question de ressources humaines. On doit embaucher les travailleurs nécessaires pour répondre aux besoins des Canadiens. C'est une crise qu'on doit régler tout de suite et on va continuer à mettre la pression sur le gouvernement de régler ça. La solution d'avoir des rendez-vous, c'est une étape, mais ça ne règle pas les grandes lignes et le temps d'attendre, les délais qui existent. Donc, on doit avoir plus des actions pour régler ça.
Mais est-ce que le gouvernement devrait rembourser les gens qui perdent leur billet d'avion? Parce que, bon, il y a quand même des gens qui ont fait leur demande par la poste des mois à l'avance. Ce pas tous des retardataires. Donc, à ce moment-là, des familles qui ont dépensé des milliers de dollars pour des billets d'avion, mais qui les perdent à cause qu'ils ne peuvent pas obtenir leur passeport.
C'est un bon point. Encore, si les Canadiens ont fait tout ce qu'ils peuvent faire, s'ils ont planifié d'avoir un voyage et tout était planifié d'avoir un temps suffisant pour avoir un passeport, et à cause de ça, ils sont dans cette situation. Je comprends pourquoi ils sont vraiment frustrés. Ils disent qu'on doit avoir des compensations. Je comprends ça. Et c'est une question, c'est une forte question, c'est une bonne question pour le gouvernement fédéral de répondre aux gens qui disent qu'on a manqué notre vol. Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire? Donc, je pense que si ce n'était pas la faute des Canadiens, pourquoi ils payent la facture? Donc, c'est une bonne question. Et ça encore souligne l'importance de régler ce problème. Et encore, ça souligne l'importance d'embaucher les ressources nécessaires pour éviter une telle situation.
Bonjour, M. Singh. Antoine Trépanier du journal Le Droit. J'aimerais savoir, pour vous, le problème avec les passeports, est-ce qu'il est politique ou bureaucratique?
C'est une question de manque de leadership, un manque de prioritisation et une situation qui était prévisible, que le gouvernement a complètement manqué le coup de répondre à quelque chose qui était complètement prévisible. C'était normal que quand les gens peuvent voyager, ils vont voyager. Et le fait que le gouvernement n'a pas planifié pour ça, c'est un manque de priorité, un manque de leadership du gouvernement fédéral.
Une des raisons pourquoi il y a un backlog, c'est beaucoup pour les background checks, pour les personnes qui ont un premier passeport, selon la ministre. Pour vous, la situation actuelle, est-ce que ça pourrait mettre en risque la sécurité des Canadiens, la sécurité de leurs données personnelles, par exemple? Est-ce que ça ouvre la porte à des situations de fraude, par exemple?
Il y a un potentiel et ce que je dis encore, c'est le fait que pour régler ce problème, la solution est claire, c'est d'avoir plus de ressources humaines, plus de travailleurs pour répondre aux besoins. Le gouvernement aura dû faire ça avant de cette crise, mais maintenant, c'est ce qu'on doit faire. J'ai toute ma confiance dans le service public, les fonctions publiques et leur capacité de faire le travail dans une manière professionnelle. Mais on a un manque de ressources à cause de le gouvernement qui manque le coup dans ce cas.
Oui, bonjour. Marco Belair-Cirino du Devoir. Avec 3 mois de recul, est-ce que l'entente intervenue entre le gouvernement libéral et votre formation politique en mars était une bonne chose? Est-ce que vous êtes satisfait de la tournure des événements?
Oui, on a obtenu des grandes victoires pour les gens. On a utilisé notre pouvoir pour aider les familles dans ce temps difficile. Quand on a fait la campagne dans les élections 2019 et 2021, plusieurs grands montants, beaucoup de gens ont dit que Les soins dentaires sont essentiels pour nous. C'est une grande question dans notre vie et on ne peut pas aborder les soins dentaires. C'était une question, c'était une inquiétude soulevée à travers les pays, dans toutes les provinces et territoires. Donc, dans cette entente, on garantit qu'on va aider les familles directement qui ne peuvent pas soigner leurs dents. Donc, c'est quelque chose de vraiment positif. Et c'est seulement un élément dans une entente où on a des autres éléments aussi pour faire face à la crise climatique, pour aller de l'avant avec la science médicale universelle. Donc, cette année, dans le budget, l'argent pour ce programme, la première phase de ce programme est là. Donc, ça, c'est un bon signe. On est dans les négociations, des conversations avec comment on va livrer un programme pour soigner les dents des enfants de moins de 12 ans et moins. Donc, tout ça est passé et on est confiant que, comme dans l'entente, c'est dit qu'on va avoir ce programme avant de la fin de cette année. On est confiant qu'on va arriver à cette date. Donc, je suis optimiste et confiant. Donc, ça veut dire qu'on a obtenu une grande victoire pour les familles avec notre pouvoir dans ce gouvernement minoritaire. Et on a offert aussi de stabilité dans un temps difficile où on a une guerre qui rend tout le monde moins sécuritaire dans un contexte d'inflation et coût de la vie qui augmente. Donc, on a donné de stabilité et finalement, les Canadiens ont envoyé 2 fois, ils ont élu un gouvernement minoritaire. Donc, leur volonté était d'avoir un gouvernement où les partis travaillent ensemble. On a respecté la décision des Canadiens et on a montré comment on peut travailler ensemble. Donc, point final, je dois ajouter, mais j'ai dit aussi directement au Premier ministre dans une conversation qui est un élément de notre entente, d'avoir une rencontre avec le Premier ministre et moi directement aussi. J'ai dit qu'on a fait ce qu'on a déjà prévisé, qu'on a fait notre part, parce que notre part était de passer des projets de loi. Ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on a déjà prévisé, qui va être la première chose. Mais après, on a fait notre partie de l'entente. Maintenant, vous avez besoin de faire votre partie. Ça veut dire de livrer l'aide aux gens. Donc, j'étais vraiment clair que si vous ne faites pas ce que vous avez promis de faire pour aider les gens, comme on a dit dans notre entente, on ne peut pas continuer avec cette entente. Mais je dis ça pour être clair, mais je suis complètement confiant qu'on va réaliser un programme qui va aider les gens.
Donc, oui, le prochain test, c'est le déploiement de l'assurance dentaire d'ici la fin de l'année. Et est-ce que vous attendez des choses dans la mise à jour économique? Et si elle ne se trouve pas dans la mise à jour de l'automne, vous pourriez retirer votre confiance? Ou c'est vraiment l'assurance dentaire qu'il faut surveiller là, comme test à cette entente-là, NPD-PLC?
2 éléments sur notre test qui était dans l'entente. C'est une allocation canadienne pour le logement. C'est une augmentation de $500. C'est pour presque 1 million de familles à travers le pays. Deuxièmement, c'est les soins dentaires. Ça veut dire un programme qui fonctionne pour soigner les dents. Pour la première phase, c'est les enfants de 12 ans et moins. Donc, ce sont les 2 éléments qu'on doit voir pour continuer avec l'entente. Et je suis confiant qu'on va réaliser ça. Mais j'ai dit ça directement au Premier ministre. Il comprend. Et on est confiant qu'on va réaliser cette aide pour les familles qui ont besoin d'aide parce qu'ils ne peuvent pas aborder de soigner leurs dents. Et pour les gens qui ont de la misère avec le loyer et le logement, cette aide directe va être là. Donc, on est vraiment confiant qu'on peut réaliser ça. On va réaliser ça. Et on va continuer de se battre pour vous et vos familles. Merci. Oui, ici de la fin de l'année.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.